few years ago, Music Theory YouTube was obsessed with this idea called negative harmony. What? Negative harmony? What kind of black magic could that be? This will change everything you know about music forever. Ooh. Just the term negative harmony makes for very easy clickbait. I'll admit, I was on the hype train for a hot minute myself. But what's the deal with it? Is it something practical, or is it just music theory nerds being overly self-indulgent? I think it's a bit of both, but I'm of the belief that any idea in music theory needs to either cohere to things that people have done, or when applied in composition, songwriting, improvisation, etc., it needs to have results that are generally favorable. Now, where did this whole thing come from? People started buzzing about it after an interview with Jacob Collier went viral, in which he talks about this idea and what you can do with it.
I saw the post of you discussing negative harmony with Herbie Hancock.
Yeah.
So what is that?
Oh,
He references a book by Ernst Levy titled A Theory of Harmony that explores the idea of polarity in music. So, after seeing that video and taking an interest in the idea, I bought a copy of the book. Levy was a Swiss composer, teacher, pianist, conductor, musicologist, and he had some rather original ideas on harmony. He wrote the manuscript for this book in 1940 to 1941, but it wasn't published until 1985, a few years after he died. It's not very long, it's only about 100 pages. I've had this book for a few years now, and I still have not finished it. I still have a bookmark in it. It's incredibly dry. It takes a lot of mental bandwidth to process what he's even talking about. He uses a lot of original terminology for things to connect all his ideas, and it's a lot to keep track of. But all of his ideas are predicated on a hypothetical Undertone Series. The Harmonic Overtone Series is a natural phenomenon from which many of our everyday ideas on harmony originated. I posted an in-depth video on the Overtone Series a few months ago if you want to refer to that. But basically, Levy posits this idea by mentally recreating the monochord experiment done by the Greek mathematician Pythagoras. Say we have a string tuned to middle C. If you stop the string at its midpoint and vibrate one half of it, you get C an octave higher. The frequency doubles. If you stop it at a third of its length and pluck that portion, the frequency of the open string is tripled, producing G an octave and a perfect fifth above the open C. Stop it at a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, and so on. You keep getting higher and higher and higher. All of those pitches we find through this process are the overtones of C. We hear all of them simultaneously at varying amplitudes whenever we pluck an open string, or make any sound, really. That's basically how overtones work. It's a natural phenomenon. Those first 5 overtones are only the notes C, E, and G. That's a C major triad. In Levy's thought experiment, he says take that open string, and instead of stopping it at its midpoint, double its length. In other words, multiply length by 2 instead of dividing by 2. The length doubled means the frequency is divided by 2, so C an octave lower. Now triple the original length, frequency is divided by 3, so that's an octave and a perfect fifth below, which is F. You see where this is going. You quadruple, quintuple, sextuple the length of the original string, and the frequencies you end up with are the original divided by 4, 5, 6, and so on. This is how you produce Levy's hypothetical Undertone Series. These are the undertones of C. Of course, they don't exist in nature. Remember how the Overtone Series of C produces a C major triad? The Undertone Series produces an F minor triad. Levy's suggestion with this is that the Undertone Series is the polar opposite of the Overtone Series, and that F minor is the opposite chord to C major. It makes some mathematical sense. C major, spelled upward, is a major third and then a minor third. Spell out those intervals downward from C, so a major third down and then a minor third. You get F minor. By this logic, Levy says we should be calling this chord C minor because it's the polar opposite to C major. But the problem with that, and he recognizes this, is that we don't hear this as C minor. We hear this as F minor. And I'm not sure we actually perceive them as being opposite to one another either. They do go nicely together, though. And I guess the idea is that you can take any chord and flip all its intervals upside down, and you get that chord's polar opposite. You can stack them together to make complex harmonies. You can substitute them for each other. In theory, anyway. Your mileage may vary, but it's fun to explore, and you may encounter some new and interesting sounds that might inspire you to pursue them further. So in that Jacob Collier interview, he talks about a way of applying these ideas that I think is a lot more practical, and Levy may eventually get to this in this book. I don't know, I haven't gotten that far. So imagine you're in the key of C major. In the key of C, G7 is the dominant chord, the main chord that would lead you back to the 1 chord, C major, right? This axis of C to G is the main pillar around which all tension is built and resolved in this key. So what we're going to do is take the G7 chord and reflect all of its notes across that axis. What? Basically, this means we need to reflect all of these notes across the midpoint between C and G, which is actually the microtonal pitch of E half flat. Is this getting complicated yet? It's not that bad. Watch. G reflected across E half flat gives us C. The B becomes A flat. The D becomes F. And F becomes D. Shuffle these notes around a little and we get F minor 6. Okay, so what? The idea here is that F minor 6, because we derived it from G7 across that main pillar of the key, will have a similar gravity and tension to it as the G7. Here's G7 resolving to C major. Here's F minor 6 resolving to C major. Where G7 sounds very bright, the F minor 6 resolving sounds warmer, darker, cozier. How about that, huh? I think that is the coolest thing. It basically means you can substitute a 5-7 chord with a 4 minor 6 chord in any key you're in to change the emotional effect when you resolve to the 1 chord. So I realize all of this is quite complicated. It's definitely some pretty advanced stuff. A super deep dive into this would make for a very, very long video. I just wanted to give an introduction to these ideas. It's totally possible to take just the amount I've shown you and go down a rabbit hole of exploring different ways to apply it. There's not really a right or wrong way of doing anything with all this. It's just exploring ideas. If you find something that sounds really interesting to you in all this, pursue it. See what becomes of it. To close out, I want to show you a way that I applied this negative harmony thing so you can hear a practical application in action. This is a section from a solo guitar composition of mine titled Nature. This section is in the key of F sharp and it has a lot of rich, expanded harmonies. What I did here was take the chords from the first couple phrases and reflect them all across that 1 to 5 axis in the key to come up with some new contrasting chords for the next couple of phrases. You're not going to hear the math involved, and that's okay. In fact, I think that's a good thing. Music shouldn't sound mathematical, but I'm pretty satisfied with the emotional content of the result, even though it was very calculated. Here you go. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. I post a new video like this every Thursday. I currently have openings for new private Zoom students. If you'd like to learn more about that, feel free to message me. That's all I've got for now. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next week.